Hey guys, welcome to what is part one of a two-part series on mixing live drums. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over the kind of things that I'll be looking for when I'm handed a multi-track session like the one that's in front of us here. So I'm thinking, is everything in phase? What kind of levels am I working with? What am I going to be dealing with? And we'll go through the mix process that I've used and show the kind of decisions that I made dependent on the material. So am I hearing something that sounds a bit lumpy? Is it really muddy? Does it need some more top end? And things of the sort. So if we have a look at the session, this is a multi-track that I've been given, and you can see we've got kick, snare, hats, rack tom, floor tom, and then left and right overheads. So the best thing we can do to start this is really get a feel for the drum kit by bringing up the faders, so we can really understand what we're looking at. There's little to no point starting to get stuck into EQ and compression and gating if we don't really understand the kit. So this is where things are panned, where the hats are in relation to the overheads, where the toms are and the rack, because we need to make sure that when we start panning things, they match the overheads, otherwise we'll get phasing and a blurry image. Cool, so straight away I'm thinking the kit's sounding pretty good. Quite happy with the balance between the elements, and think it's time to start really listening to the overheads on their own so we can get a feel for the panning. Like I mentioned before, it's really important that we make sure we've got everything to match the overheads. And this also goes for room mics if you sent those as well. Make sure if things are to the left in the room mics, they're also to the left in the overheads, and they're also now panned left with your single mics. Cool, so straight away I'm getting hats to the left, so we need to pan those to the left. Let's find a little section where the toms are playing, and then we can get a feel for those. Obviously where the rack falls and where the floor tom fits. Okay, it's pretty clear. We've got left hand side, we're going to have the rack, which I've already panned, and then on the right hand side we're going to have the floor tom, which I've panned as well, so they now match the overheads. Now we're happy with that, we've started to get a bit of a feel for the shape of things. Let's start with the kick. If we play that, and this is the raw recording, no plugins on it. Straight away I'm thinking we need to beef this up a little bit, and there's a little bit of EQ that's going to be needed. So as you can see, the tape is something I use quite consistently just because I really like when it does the bottom end. It just adds some roundness, some warmth, and also a little bit of compression, so it's going to sort our dynamics out a little bit. Next up in the chain in the virtual mix rack, I'm going to use a gate. So what the gate does, it means that any signal that's below a certain threshold will be closed so we can't hear it. It just means I can process the kick on its own and not worry about affecting the snare. Let's listen to it on its own. And with the gate on. Yep, sound is so much better. By doing that, it just means, as I mentioned previously, I can start doing EQ moves and compression moves on the kick, and they won't be affecting the snare drum and the spill from the hats, which means I can be a little bit more aggressive. So let's have a look at the EQ. First move, a little bit of top end, about 1.5k. Just add a little bit of click, which I think is quite nice in the kick. So after listening to the kick, what I've been hearing is lots of muddiness around that 200 kind of area, 250. Like, you'll often find that with a kick. So let's hear, what I can do is I'll boost it and then you can hear exactly what I'm hearing. Yep, there you go. So that's the muddiness. That's the kind of thing we want to get rid of. If I go back to where we were previously. Yep. And it's a lot cleaner, a lot tighter. It just means that we can really focus in on getting the kick to be the shape that we want. A little bit of 50 just for weight, and then a tiny bit of 15. And last but not least, on the Neve emulation, I'm just high passing around 36 hertz, just to get rid of like any subs that's going to start affecting my compression on the group and also on the master. Let's move on to the snare. You'll see that a lot of my settings are duplicated just because I'm treating them the same way, but one thing to notice is the utility tool that I've added to the snare. What this allows me to do is to check the phase relationship between the different microphones. Often when recording either the same sound source, or if you've not been too eager whilst you've been tracking the drums, you can find that microphones are out of phase with each other, which means waveforms, instead of both being in correlation going up and down, they're actually clashing. So as one goes down, the other goes up. That means we get cancellation of different frequencies. So if you imagine the hi-hat and the snare being out, every time the snare hits, obviously we're going to get a strange sound because it's clashing against the other elements. Okay, so let's check what the snare sounds like on its own with no plugins on first. Cool, okay, sounding pretty good. Do like it, but straight away I'm hearing a few issues, especially in that low mid area again. So as you can see, we've gone for the gate, just because, as mentioned with the kick, it just means we can really focus in on keeping a clean sound. Let's check it. And with the gate on, so much better. We've got rid of all that spill that's coming from the kick especially, and also the hi-hat. Often you'll get little bits, but don't worry about that. It's a lot better than it was. So processing wise, we've got a virtual mix rack, which has in it the virtual channel. What I quite like to do is load this onto every single drum part, which mimics the sound of a desk and also gives us a few extra harmonics and a little bit of drive. Next, I've got compression. Nothing too hectic. As you see, the attack time's quite slow, but I've got a quick release just because I want to let the transient through and then also clamp down on the body, as well as controlling a little bit of the dynamics. Cool. EQ wise, I've got the Neve emulation on it again. Again, scooping out a little bit of that low mid, which we've had problems with. There's the air band at the top, having a little bit of brightness, and 1.5K would look like, just boosting, just to give it a little bit more snap into the snare. Sometimes you can find that snares have a bit too much 200 hertz, so without and with. Lastly, we're rolling off at around 100 hertz, which again is going to be dropping out any sub frequencies and getting rid of any like kick spill that might potentially have got through the gate. Right, okay, up next are the hats. Now, because we've got so much of these in the overheads, we've been quite aggressive with the EQ. We've cut out a huge amount of low mid and also high passing quite aggressively. Literally just wanted a little bit of sizzle over the top, just to bring out a little detail in the hats to really help the overheads, which have most of it. This can sound a little bit weird on its own, but remember, it's all about context. So let's check it in the mix. So that's with the EQ on and without the EQ. Right, next up, the toms. Rack, we have a high pass, just to get rid of any sub frequencies because there's a lot of boom in the bottom end of a tom. And then let me just jump to a section where we can loop it. Cool, okay. Similar layout to last time, but as you can see, we've not bothered with the gate. Now, with something like a tom drum, it inherently sounds terrible on the kit, apart from on the drum itself. So gating can remove the drum for us, or remove the spill rather, but sometimes it just doesn't work, it just doesn't get to how you want it to be. So what you'll see is I've actually gone in and edited out all the audio and then put fades in and fades out for the drum hit. I just find I've got way more control by doing this, and if you've got a song which is a little bit tom heavy, yes, it's going to be tedious, but I just find the results are so much better and I know exactly what's going off. I know if there's no audio there, nothing can be playing. So let's have a look at the mix. We've got, as always, virtual channel to copy everything else, and then compression wise, we're doing the same thing. We've got nice and open attack just to let through that transient, and then a really quick release which is going to clamp things down 2-to-1, so nothing too aggressive. EQ wise, we are adding a little bit of top end shimmer. We're adding some weight to the low mids again using this API EQ and a little bit of sub as well, just to fatten them up. So we can go with and without the EQ there. Onto the floor tom. Same again, strict editing. EQ is a little bit more aggressive. We've cut out some low mids, which seems to be a bit of an issue with this kit, and we've also high passed. So let's listen to the tom on its own. Then the mix rack. Let's bring it in. Same again. You know the drill now with the gate. Going into a virtual mix rack just for those extra harmonics and a little bit of a unification between the whole kit. Compression, same again. Open attack, quick release, 2-to-1. And we've got very similar EQ curve as well. We're just taking into account it's a slightly lower tuned drum, the floor tom, compared to the rack. So we've moved the EQ points around a little bit. Right, now the overhead's the most important image of the kit. Let's have a listen without any processing. Sounding good, and with. Okay, great, sounding cool. Let's have a look at what we've done. Virtual channel strip, extra harmonics, a little bit of unification between everything, get that desk feel. Into compression, which again is nice and open with a quick release. I don't want to be slamming this too hard because the cymbals and the hats, so we'll only take off a little bit. EQ wise, top end, a little bit of shimmer and some sub, it would seem. Yep, EQ in, especially that middle band as well, just a little bit of snap on the snare. Tiny bit of brightness from the knees as well, just to help it. Cool. Next up, we've got the virtual tape machine, which I really like using on drums. Just seems to do great things to the transient and tighten everything up a little bit. Cool, sounding good. Last in the line, we have one more EQ, which, from what I can remember, yep, it's pulling out low mids again. So this is really a strong area of build up on this kit and across many drums. It's really worth taking into account, even in full mixes, I'd say. Be aware of the low mids around 200 to 400. It can get muddy. And then one more resonance peak. Yep, exactly. We don't want that. And down. Cool, and finally let's listen to the kit as a whole with all the processing. Yep, really happy with that. Lots of weight in the kit, a little bit of clarity from getting rid of those low mids. But as I was mentioning before, let's check out just how bad the tom mics can sound if you don't do gating or delete everything. Take off the plugins for you. Yeah, pretty bad. Unfortunately, tom mics sound stunning on toms, but just do not do good things for the kick or the snare or the hats. So it really is important that you get rid of those. They just sound terrible and really muddy up the image and muddy up the vibe of the whole kit. Cool, so there we go. That's part one of the series. We've just covered the basics there, just getting a feel for the kit, getting like a nice balance between everything. In part two, we're going to go into a little bit more detail about how I process the kit as a whole, my use of parallel compression, what goes on the master, and also a cool little tricks that I use for when using sends from snares, and also some sidechain EQ, which will help with any problems that we came across. The kit here was beautifully recorded, but it's not always that case, and sometimes you do have to try and rescue things, so we'll go into that in a bit more depth. If anything's come up that you want covering, or you think we could go into more detail over, just let me know in the comments or drop us an email, and we'll cover those in another blog article or another video. Cool.